I did not come to Kraval Ithun to fight anyone. I came to fix a small part on a rented cargo ship and leave before the trade window closed. That was my whole plan. Get in, get the part, get out. Do not look for trouble. Trouble, as it turned out, was already looking for me. I was carrying a box of parts through the busy market when the crowd in front of me opened up like a curtain, and I walked straight into a large open circle of white sand. People stood all around it, watching. In the middle stood a woman. She was not human, of course. Her skin had a soft bronze shine. Her eyes were a strange violet color, and her hands had extra joints that made them move in a way that felt slightly unnatural to watch. But she stood like someone who had been born to be looked at, like a person who carried a heavy weight and still refused to bend under it. She was speaking to the crowd when her eyes landed on me, on the only human anywhere near this market. "You," she said, and pointed straight at me, not with anger, with something closer to hope. Me? I was still holding the box under one arm. "You are human." It was not a question. Yes, last time I checked. A wave of noise moved through the crowd, somewhere between laughter and surprise. The woman stepped closer. I would later learn her name was Ves Korai, a princess of the Ithun royal family, though at the time, that meant nothing to me at all. "I am to be given," she said, "to whoever defeats my father's champion in a fight. This is our old law, older than anything your people have written down. For 11 years, no one has beaten him." She looked toward the center of the circle. "You would be the next person to try, or the first human to try." That is when I saw the champion. He stood near the edge of the circle, doing slow stretches like this was just another normal day for him. He was easily twice my size, with thick gray skin, a strong ridged head, and arms that looked like they belonged on a statue built to scare people. He did not even glance at me. He looked completely calm, like nothing in the next few minutes worried him at all. "I have a delivery to make," I said, which is probably one of the least brave sentences ever spoken in front of a princess and a crowd of aliens. "You have a choice," Ves Korai said, and for a second, her calm royal voice cracked just slightly. "Beat him, and you win me. Refuse, and I will be given to him tonight, just like I have been offered every single time for 11 years, because no one has ever won." I want to be honest. What made me stop was not bravery. It was one word. She did not say married. She said given. And the way the crowd went silent after she said it, not out of respect, but out of discomfort, told me everything I needed to know about what that word really meant to her. I put the box down. "What are the rules?" I asked. The champion, whose name I later learned was Draeth Ost, finally turned his head toward me. He laughed, a low rolling sound like stones rubbing together. "There are no rules," Ves Korai said. "Until one of you cannot continue." Wonderful. No rules at all. I was a mechanic. I spent my days fixing machines, not fighting giants. My fighting experience was one basic self-defense class years ago, and a childhood of being chased around by my older brother. Somehow, that second one turned out to matter more than I expected. They handed me a long spear. I had never held one before. Draeth Ost held his like it was simply another part of his own arm. A horn sounded, and he moved toward me like a wall falling down. "Here is something nobody tells you about fighting someone much bigger and stronger than you. You cannot match their strength. You cannot push back against a falling wall." So I did not try. I did the one thing that always frustrated my older brother when we used to wrestle as kids. I did not stand still. I moved sideways, not smoothly, almost losing my balance twice in the first few seconds, but enough that his first big strike missed me by a good distance. He recovered fast, faster than I expected from something his size, but that recovery still cost him a moment, and I used that moment to move closer instead of running away. Nobody expects the smaller person to move closer. I hit the back of his knee with the end of my spear. He did not fall, but he stumbled, just slightly, and the crowd made a sound like a breath finally being let out, because for the first time in 11 years, someone had made Draeth Ost stumble. He turned to face me again, and this time his expression was not angry. It looked more like he was quietly rethinking everything he thought he knew about this fight. I realized then that every person who had faced him before probably tried to match his strength. Bigger swings, harder hits. I did not have strength to offer, so I offered the only thing I had. I kept moving. I made him chase patterns instead of me. The fight lasted longer than I expected. My arms were shaking, my chest was burning, and at one point his arm brushed my shoulder hard enough that my vision went blurry for a second. But every time he swung with full force, I was already somewhere else. And every time he reset his stance, I was already back near him, tapping the same spot behind his knee, again and again, the way you loosen a tight bolt. Not with one big turn, but with many small ones, all pointed the same way, until something finally gives. After what felt like the 10th strike to that same spot, his leg buckled and he dropped to one knee. I stood there, breathing hard, spear pointed toward him, hardly able to believe I was still standing. "Yield!" I said, without thinking, in English. He understood anyway. Dreythost looked up at me, not with anger, with something closer to relief. "Yield!" he repeated, in the common trade language, then added quietly, almost like a secret just for me. 11 years. 11 years I have won, and 11 years I did not want to. I did not fully understand what he meant until later. Being an unbeatable champion was not something he had chosen for himself. The old law forced him to keep winning, again and again, whether he wanted to or not. Losing was the only way out of a role he never asked for in the first place. In a strange way, we had something in common. Neither of us had walked into that circle because we truly wanted to be there. Veskarai crossed the sand before the crowd had even finished cheering. She did not look at me like a prize looking at its winner. She looked at me like someone checking that a locked door had finally opened. "You are bleeding," she said. "You are staring," I said. "You are human," she said, as if that explained everything. Out here, maybe it did. That night, they gave me a room in the Royal Hall, a tall stone building with high windows and soft blue lights along the walls. I sat on the edge of a bed too big for one person, still holding a cold cloth to my shoulder, trying to understand how a simple parts delivery had turned into this. Veskarai came to see me later, without guards, without the crowd, without the crown she had worn earlier that day. "You do not have to stay," she said, standing near the door. "The old law says I must offer myself to the winner. It does not say the winner must accept." That surprised me. Nobody mentioned that part earlier. "Nobody ever wins," she said simply, "so nobody ever asks." I looked at her for a long moment. She had spent who knew how many years standing in that circle, waiting for a stranger to either win her freedom or take it from her in a different way. And now that someone finally had, she was standing here giving me an exit, even though it would clearly cost her something to offer it. "Tell me what happens if I leave," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Then the champion fights again next season, and I stand in the circle again next season. And the season after that. And if I stay, then the old law is finished. A bonded princess cannot be offered again. It has never happened before. No human has ever won." She paused. "No one has ever asked what I wanted either. Not once. In 11 years. I thought about my rented ship still waiting outside the market, about the coolant lines still sitting somewhere in the sand, about the trade window that had probably already closed without me. And then I thought about the way her voice had cracked earlier that day, just slightly, right before she pointed at me. "What do you want?" I asked her. She looked surprised by the question, like nobody had actually said those words to her before. "I want to choose something for once," she said. "Even if the thing I choose is uncertain, even if it is a stranger from a planet I have never seen. At least it would be my own choice, not a rule written before I was born." I stayed. The next few weeks were strange, in the best and worst ways possible. The royal court did not know what to do with me. I was not a soldier. I was not a noble. I was a mechanic who happened to know how to dodge a very large spear. Some of the older advisors looked at me like I was a mistake waiting to be corrected. Others, including Dreythost himself, treated me with a strange kind of respect, like I had accidentally solved a problem everyone else had been too afraid to touch. Dreythost, freed from his 11 years as champion, spent his first days simply walking around the palace grounds without a spear in his hand, looking almost confused about what to do with himself. One afternoon, he found me trying to repair a small mechanical door lock that had been stuck for years. something the palace engineers had given up on long ago. "You fix broken things," he said, watching me work. "That is basically my whole job," I said. He crouched down beside me, watching closely. "Show me." So I did. I explained gears, tension, and pressure, the same way I would explain it to anyone back home. He listened carefully, asked good questions, and by the end of the afternoon, we had the lock working again. It was such a small thing, but it felt bigger than that. It felt like two people who had been forced into a fight, now choosing, on their own, to build something together instead. Word of the small fixed lock spread through the palace faster than I expected. Soon, people were bringing me other broken things. A stuck window, a cartwheel that would not turn properly, an old fountain that had not worked in years. I was not a warrior, and everyone knew it now. But I was useful in a different way, and that seemed to matter to people just as much. Veskorai noticed too. "You could have simply enjoyed being a prince," she said one evening, watching me clean grease off my hands after fixing yet another door hinge. "Instead, you are fixing fountains." "I do not know how to be a prince," I said. "I know how to fix things. Might as well be useful while I figure out the rest." She smiled, the first real smile I had seen from her since the day in the circle. "That is a very human answer. I will take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. Not everything was easy. Some members of the court whispered that a human should never sit near the royal family, that the old law had been broken in a way nobody expected, that 11 years of tradition should not end because of one lucky mechanic with fast feet. I heard those whispers more than once. I chose not to answer them with anger. Instead, I kept fixing things, kept showing up, kept proving in small, quiet ways that I was not going anywhere. One evening, an older advisor confronted me directly in the hallway outside the dining hall. He was tall, with pale gray robes and sharp eyes that clearly did not trust me at all. "You do not belong here," he said flatly. "You defeated Draethost through tricks, not honor." "I defeated him by not getting hit," I said. "Where I come from, that is considered pretty smart. This is not your world." "No," I agreed. "But it might be my home now, if that is all right with everyone." He did not look satisfied, but he also did not have a strong answer for that. He walked away without another word, and I stood there for a long moment, feeling the full weight of just how far from home I really was. Later that night, Veskorai found me standing near one of the tall windows, looking out at the strange twin moons hanging low over the palace. "He does not trust easily," she said, joining me at the window. "None of them do. Give them time." "I am not worried about time," I said. "I am worried about whether I am doing right by you. This whole thing started because you needed someone to win a fight. I do not want to just be another chapter in an old law. I want to actually be here, for real reasons." She was quiet for a moment, watching the moons with me. "You already are," she finally said. "The law brought you here. It did not decide what happens after. That part, we get to choose ourselves." I thought about that for a long time after she said it. About choices, and about how strange it was that a random delivery job had somehow turned into the biggest choice of my life. I thought about my old ship, my old job, and my old quiet life fixing machines nobody paid much attention to. None of that life had prepared me to stand in a fighting circle in front of a crowd of aliens. But maybe it had prepared me for what came after, for staying, for fixing what was broken, one small piece at a time, whether that meant a stuck lock, an old fountain, or 11 years of unfair tradition. Months later, the court still had its doubts, and some probably always would, but the fountain worked again, the old locks worked again, and a law that had trapped two people for over a decade had finally been closed for good, not because of a fight, but because of everything both of us chose to do after it ended. I never did deliver those coolant lines on time. My old ship left without me. The trade window closed, just like I feared, and somewhere out there, another mechanic probably had to explain to an angry client why the parts never arrived. Worth it. Every single bit of it.